Hello and welcome to lesson 7.2.3. Please get out your notes, get out your Chromebook, and open to 7.2.3. The link will be in the description below. And title your notes 7.2.3. What is the period of a function? Go ahead and pause the video to do that now. If you've titled your notes, go ahead and copy the learning target for today. Define and learn about period, amplitude, and midline. Go ahead and copy the learning target now. Now that you have your notes set up, go ahead and read the intro to today's lesson, period of a cyclic function. In lesson 7.2.2, go ahead and finish reading the intro to this section. Pause the video now to read the intro. Now that you've read the intro, go ahead and read problem 7-138 and think about what it's asking you to do. Go ahead and pause the video to read now. Now that you've read the problem and thought about what it's asking you to do, let's talk about it. It's asking you to find the period for each of the following situations. The period is the length of one full cycle. So in part A, it's asking you if the input is angle theta in the unit circle and the output is the cosine of theta, what's the period of that function? So what would the period going around the unit circle, what angle would that be? So if we're going around the unit circle one time, what angle measure would one period be for that cosine graph? Go ahead and think about that. Pause the video to think now and write down what you think it is. Now that you've thought about what one period for a cosine graph would be, let's talk about what it is. So if we're going around our unit circle, like we talked about in class, the angle measure around the entire circle from start to finish would be 2 pi radians. So our angle measure is 2 pi radians. That's the period. So the length of one full cycle is 2 pi radians around the circle. If we graph cosine, we can see that this works out. So y equals cosine of, let's say, x instead of theta. 2 pi is about 6.28. So let's look at our two peaks. It goes from 0 to 2 pi to go one full cycle. That's one period. So you can see it in the circle, but you can also see it in the graph. That the distance on the x-axis is 2 pi radians to go around one full cycle of the unit circle. Take a moment to pause the video and read part B to think about what the period is for this situation. Pause the video now to look at part B. So if we look at part B, we see that the input is time and the output is the average daily temperature in New York. So ask yourself, what would the period of this function be? How long would it take to find the average daily temperature for each day, each date in New York? So how long to find the daily temperature for every day or date in New York? How long would that be? Pause the video now to think about it and write down your answer. Now that you've thought about this question, let's talk about it. So if we wanted to find the average daily temperature for every day or date in New York, we have to look at every day of the year. So the period would be 1 year. To get to every single date in the calendar, to find the average daily temperature on a given day in New York. So the period is 1 year. Now go ahead and read part C. Think about what the period would be for part C. So part C is when the input is time and the output Miss Rudd has in 1 day of quarantine. So what would the period that we're looking at be? What's the period for this graph? Pause the video now to write down your answer. So the period that we're looking at 1 day. So it's in 1 day of quarantine, how many snacks do I have? So the clock resets every day. I'm not going to say how many snacks I have because that's a little bit embarrassing. However, we're looking at 1 day. Now that we finished the problem, let's go ahead and review what we did. In part A, we found the period it takes to go around the entire unit circle when the input is angle and the output is the cosine of that angle of the unit circle. We found that the period is 2 pi radians because there are 2 pi radians in a circle. In part B, we were asked what the period is when the input is time and the output is daily average temperature in New York. Well, if we want to find the average daily temperature for every date in the year, our period would be 1 year. And lastly, we wanted to find the period when the input is time and the output is how many snacks Miss Rudd, me, has had in 1 day of quarantine. The period in this case is 1 day because we're counting how many snacks per day. Remember, if you have any questions, to log into your class's Google Meet or Zoom times. It's very important to be checking in with your teacher and asking any questions that you have. Go ahead and watch the second video in this lesson if you have no questions. If you have questions, be sure to ask those questions. Thank you and have a great day.